Welcome to the Great Security Debate. This show has experts taking sides to broaden understanding of a topic. Therefore, it's safe to say that the views expressed are not necessarily those of the people we work for. Or heck, they may not even represent our own views, as we take a position for the sake of the debate. Our website is greatsecurity.debate.net, and you can contact us via email at feedback@greatsecurity.debate.net or on Twitter @SecurityDebate. Now, let's join the debate, already in progress.
That was a perfect lean in there, and I really like the idea of the topic that we have, the whole premise around the reboot, refresh, and talking kind of about what got you here won't get you there. And it's been interesting to hear a lot of the speakers earlier, including the CIOs on the panel as well, talk about the idea of hiring, right? And that because we're in a virtual world and being able to open it up to candidates, not just outside of Michigan, but also to be able to work remote. But what I didn't hear anybody talk about throughout the day was still the requirements of entry, right? And there's this huge opening in, well, I shouldn't say there's a huge opening in security. There's this huge need for security analysts, security specialists, but our point of entry for a lot of businesses, especially a lot of older, larger companies, is still to have a 4-year degree. And it's something we've talked about, because when it comes to the threat actors, and I think if I ask for a show of hands here, how many people in the audience know who Yakubets is? Nobody, maybe one or two. How many people know who REvil is? Ever hear of REvil ransomware? He started when he was 18 years old, so I'm pretty sure he didn't have a college education. And he's formally been indicted on a $100 million charge, right, for running a ransomware organization. But when we look at the points of entry, and you guys give me your thoughts too, when we look at the points of entry for the people that have the skill set or could have the skill set, but maybe don't have the education, I imagine there's probably plenty of companies here too that have used outsourcing as a way to bring in some talent. But even after a few years, can you bring those people in or still find it difficult to hire because, well, they don't have the degree? And I'm not, just for the record, I'm not going against education here, so I don't want everyone to be like, but I'm just talking about the point of entry when we talk about that, right? And how we set the bar. There is this idea of what got us here won't get us there, and rethinking some of that. Yes? No?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm embattled in this because I come from a family that's really steeped in higher education and academia. I worked in higher ed. I work in higher ed research now. And those degrees do open certain doors. But in a field like security, where so much is done around technology and things that don't necessarily require that formal education, and that coupled with the gap, with the talent gap, with the size of, with the number of open job recs that we have, and the inability to get them in and get them in quickly enough, I've taken all of those degree requirements out of my positions, especially at the entry level, and it also, it closes off a large number of access to a large number of really great people, because it does in and of itself bring some limitations to the scope of people that don't have access to university, don't have access to formal training, and may never have access to formal training, but they got the skills.
But maybe you leave the experience requirement on there.
Well, for entry level experience is 0. If you're entry, you don't need experience.
I mean, you don't need 15 years of Kubernetes experience when
No.
it's only been around for how long?
25 of AWS.
Yeah.
So entry level is entry level.
So I guess this is the problem with me being the third to speak up here, is I naturally now have to take the other side of this. Is that how that works?
If you can.
So I
didn't start for a reason.
I feel like one of the things that we've talked about when we talk about education, that it provides not only the academia version, what we're learning, but the mindset. So I do think there's a component of that, and maybe it becomes more of kind of that hybrid the way you're looking at things. So you're not ruling people out because they don't have a degree, but I think the degree does give kind of 4 years of the way you're thinking as you think about well-rounded, right, is the term I would use. It provides well-rounded, not to say that it's exclusive to academia and going through college. Certainly, going to look at the degrees behind some of us, I think there's a natural kind of defending it, but I think there is a benefit to having that to some components. Like if you think about going through an MBA program, learning about leadership and stuff like that. So I think some of that getting the foot in the door, but I do think there are some benefits as you start to move into manager and other leadership roles.
Well, I'll dispute my own point. After graduation, I spent 20 years advising some friends of mine that were provosts at the university I attended on what does industry want coming out of school. And the thing that really was interesting about those that came out of higher ed was people who knew how to learn. I mean, it's an advertisement for liberal arts education.
Right.
You know how to learn. You don't necessarily have technical specific skills, because in technology those are going to change in a year. But you have people that know how to learn. So if you can equate that experience, that learning how to learn without a degree, come on. I think that's really all that's necessary right now, an appetite and an ability to continue to learn.
So essentially, it's the potential or the willingness to challenge what we think we know to be true.
Those
are the
exact words that came out of my mouth.
So I was going to say, I'm going to throw this out
It was
there,
that
though,
well
because
said.
So MCWT just hosted their first cyber challenge for high school girls this last weekend. So a little round of applause for everybody that's in here. But it was a pilot program. We had about 8 girls come out, and we had about 4 or 5 technical experts on hand to be able to answer questions, right? And a big shout out to Immersive Labs, who put together this whole setup. But what I found that was really interesting, and this goes right back to the point of entry, was when we put this together, we were a little bit nervous that it was going to be too difficult. And we had it set up to go from 8:30 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. All 8 of them, including one of them that was a freshman in high school, finished before lunch.
Wow.
Yeah. And the questions they were asking wasn't like they didn't know what they were doing. It was just simple context errors, right? Like going through it and being able, when they first showed up, you could see that not only were they nervous, we were a little bit nervous as well. But by the time they were done, I mean, they had so many questions for us. Like, what does the path forward look like in cybersecurity? They really had questions for us because they were so interested and so excited about how well they did. Now think about that, right? And I'm sure, and look at Erik, your background was in finance, right? So you didn't necessarily go to school for 4 years to get a cybersecurity, degree, right? So you can pull people even from within your own organization, right? Rethink it. And I think that's the push that I was trying to make, and why I wanted to hammer the first question out like that. But I mean, feel free to go, because I was going to follow this up because you mentioned leadership, and then follow it up on the second part to this, which is now that we're virtual, right? Like in a virtual world, what got us there won't get us there. Now, how do you be present in somebody's life?
Right. So real quick, I will echo what you're saying. So I was talking to a rather large company that is in the security operations center business. That's one of their core functions. And that's exactly what they were mimicking, that if you talk about thinking about it from the attacker's perspective, that, a lot of the times, look at what happened with SolarWinds, right? I think we look at that and kind of revel.
What did happen with SolarWinds?
With SolarWinds, and it's kind of rolling the attribution dice, but the general belief is that it was a Russian operative that was able to break in and embedded the code that then pushed into many organizations. From an attack scenario, I think as technologists, we took a step back and go, wow, that was really cool. But at the same time, wow, we've got a lot of holes, right? If you think about the entry points into enterprises, but the creativity, and I think that's what we look at the attacker space, and that's what you're looking for, is the creativity. So as I fast forward, long way to say. So as I was talking to the Security Operations Center, one of the things they were doing is looking for retired people or children coming out of high school, stuff like that, because of those different thoughts. So they were going after lawyers. They were going after a number of different acumens that were outside of the typical technology space to infuse those different points of view. But something you were saying, Brian, you were starting to talk about the entry point. Take that one, run with that. What is a good way to get connected, since you came from a non-security space and were able to move in?
Oh, that's a kind of a loaded question, Erik.
Do we have 2 hours, 3 hours? Are we?
Yeah. And I did promise them that there would be 0 automotive references, because more than 90% of what I turn to goes to automotive, just because I spent so long there.
If you'd like to chronicle them, you can watch episodes 1 through 39 of the Great Security Debate, and there are many.
There's a lot of truth to that. So great entry point. So for one, you look at, what MCWT was trying to pilot with the first cyber challenge, we plan to roll that out statewide. That's one way. 2, I think, is taking a chance, right? Regardless of how old you are, right? And there's some other great programs with Ignite, with MCWT as well, where you have women that have been in the workplace for a while and are just looking to try something new, and this gives them an opportunity to do that. I think from an entry point standpoint, companies need to look at that as well. Are we even opening it up to people internally? Or are we afraid to pull people from different groups because we believe they're too important for this group or too important for that group? Meaning they may have other ambitions and wishes, and have we listened to that? Because I don't think we do enough of that after, I worked for the same organization for over 16 and a half, 17 years before I moved into security, and my ability to try to move from my position was very much stymied. Like I was never going to be able to move out of there.
Well, yeah, it's the Phoenix Project problem, right? Everyone is Brent. Everyone is really good at what they do, and everyone is very fearful of the day that person leaves that role or is unable to come in and answer all the questions about it. But I think that the information security world is about three different topics. It's about not just confidentiality, it's integrity and availability. And availability means having the information and resources available when you need them. And that includes the knowledge. I've been going through a number of risk assessments and trying just enterprise current status of things. And a theme that keeps coming up is all the knowledge is in one or two people's heads, and that doesn't work. When that person wins the lottery,
Right.
we're done. The organization is done.
Or if that person leaves, right? Because there has been a lot of this and people were calling it the Great Resignation, right? And I think, Eric, you had a different name for it.
The great reshuffle.
It was the great reshuffle. You put me on the spot
we
there.
did a whole talk about it.
Yeah.
But so with that,
The great reprioritization, I think is what.
Reprioritization. So with that though, so COVID definitely shook things up. We've talked about this in depth for, throughout today, but throughout different organizations. But from a management side, right, like the idea of being present, now we're allowing to hire people from outside the state of Michigan. We heard that. We're allowing people to work remote. It's here to stay. But how do you find a way from a leadership side to be present? You can use all these tools, right? But I thought one of the great points that was made earlier was that vulnerability aspect, being able to ask questions, right, to get some of that out. And I thought that led great to how are you feeling today, on a scale from 1 to 10, and you can't use 7. I mean, those are great points, but how are you doing that?
But spoiler alert, you have to actually care about the answer.
100%.
You actually have to care about the answer. You can't just say, okay,
can't phone
great,
it home.
and then move on back to your 97 meetings. And I'm not saying it's you. I'm just saying the royal you has to take the answer. And I'm going to take that opportunity to flip this because I'm really curious. We've talked a lot about job seekers. We've talked about people that want to come in, what they can do. But hiring managers, you just changed jobs. Congratulations. I've recently taken a new role. Erik, you're still within a year and a half of having taken a new role. What if we think about this like the software industry? I make a lot of comments about software and products that are made that are good. They make decisions that are good for the company, not for the user. What if we apply that to hiring too? Hiring has not traditionally been a process that's candidate friendly. It's a process that's built for the benefit of the company, not for the candidates. So from our own experiences, what things can we recommend to hiring managers to make that transition, to make this time of change? We've done it a certain way. It won't necessarily get us where we want to go.
Yeah, I think the thing that resonates, actually what kept coming to mind was the comment about, it took me 9 no's and I was holding out for that why, or that yes, right? And thinking about that, and that's, at least from my perspective, what I see as kind of a barrier in changing that mentality, because we've always gone, it's almost a checkbox activity, right? If you think about even some of the algorithms, and I know we've talked about this before, some of the algorithms that go through some of the resumes are looking for what? Buzzwords. Right, that it's kind of stacked against everything. So we've now automated the way we look at people, and I think it's time we step back and take a more people-centric approach to that.
So, I was going to say, so they were talking books earlier, and they went through 3 leadership books. I was standing right next to Dan, and they asked the first one, rose his hand. Second one raised his hand. Third one raised his hand. And then Dan said to me, he goes, but those are all pretty old books, right? So as things change really quick, I shouldn't say really quick, as things have unfolded, especially over the last 3 years, one thing that resonated with me, and I can't remember if it was the Infinite Game or Leaders Eat Last, but the idea of vulnerability that was talked about today, there's something in there, I think it had to do with an oil platform, and the person who was running it, who they chose to do it, and how he decided to get to know everybody on his team. and why that team not only worked so great together, but how they performed at a higher level than anybody else in the company. And it's been a case study, right? And what they came back to find was that everybody felt safe to be able to share how they felt with who they were reporting to, who their leader was, that they knew they were safe. And think about that, right? Like, if you feel safe. I know people, and I've been in an organization where literally when you were sent out the end of year survey to feel how is everything going, and I asked people, I was like, so how, did you fill it out honestly? Like, well, anything that wasn't a 7, I just didn't even answer because I wasn't sure if it was really confidential. I was like, seriously? Other people I talked to were like, I gave everything a 10. They're like, I wasn't going to say anything bad. Like, what if it's not confidential? I'm like, oh my God, think about that. Then they reported out at the beginning of the year, like, everything is so great. Confidence is at an all-time high. It isn't. Like, that's as toxic as it gets. It can't get more toxic than that.
You're the one guy who will walk out of the TSA and they have a little smiley face NPS rating thing. You hit the red one, don't you?
I mean, like, you guys know me. Like, I try not to hold back, right? And there's probably been times where that's hurt me, foot and mouth. But I really always try to say it like it is. In those cases, though, like, from case study at point, like, best teams work well when you have that ability to feel that you can be vulnerable to your management, when you're not afraid.
I think Dan hit it on the head, right? It's being an authentic leader. It's not just going through the actions. You think about it. We've been talking about it for the longest time. Fail fast, fail fast. We got to go faster. We got to go faster. But part of failing fast is getting past the hubris of being able to say, yeah, we did fail, but you know what? We're going to learn from it. We're going to move forward. That now goes in the Rolodex of things that we won't do again. We'll learn from it, and that's going to be incorporated into where we go next.
No, great point. Now, and Dan, if you got anything to add to that, I was going to go to the fail fast part. And
I have one more thing on hiring, and then we can move to that. It's current. Marcus from CBI posted something this morning, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But it was about the fact that striking while the iron is hot, the idea that markets are starting to change. Even today, we're seeing with inflation, with changes in markets, we're seeing hiring start to contract again a little bit. And budgets being cut, even including security budgets. So now is the time. Make an easy process for hiring. Don't put 27 interviews in front of it. And 27 is not the highest number I've heard from people. Make it an easy process. They're interviewing the company as much as the company's interviewing you. But you have the window is shrinking. The markets are not going to keep it quite as fluid as it's been to be able to get anybody, let alone information security people. And what this also means is that people who are looking for jobs, now, if you're looking, now's the time. We've come upon the end of bonus season. Everyone's paid out. People are leaving. They've left their jobs. My LinkedIn has been flooded with, I've got new jobs. If this is it. This is the time to go.
So the musical chairs music is playing now. And
and I'm nobody's friend. Nobody's HR friend about retention and other things. But the reality is that if you've been considering it, it may be time to look because that window is shrinking. But if you're looking to hire, the window is also shrinking.
Yeah. No, that's a good point because we're always focused on retention, keeping engagement once you're in. But there's an engagement component on the front end of that as well.
If you really knew me, you'd know I'd have a 5-year shelf life, and I know this and talk about it in interviews.
I do know that. I think it's public now.
Yeah, well,
that's very
there's
public
nobody
now.
here.
So I'm gonna flip that when we talked about, and this goes more into I look at security from a product side, but also transformation side. What got us here won't get us there. Companies. People today were talking about their transformation, even the last 2 years. I think, Stacy, you mentioned that you had never bought anything on Amazon. Now you just look forward to Tuesdays to figure out what's in the box. That's a lot of people. I mean, that's not just in North America. That's everywhere. But as companies begin that digital transformation, and it started years ago for some companies, moving to the cloud, right? And from a security side too, a lot of what we've done has always been on-prem, right? And the architecture of the products we were buying were architectured for on-prem. So as we move to the cloud, those same companies that we're talking to, that we're doing business with, say, oh no, we also have a cloud version as well. Really? Is it really an architected cloud version? And the ability to have time to test those things or look at those things to be able to make decisions for the business, because now the business is moving really fast as well. right? And you got to put things in. Thoughts?
There is cloud, and there is, I will host it for you in an Amazon VPC that says cloud, but is really just a data center hosted at Amazon. But both are viable models. But typically, you design for cloud, and I've had the luxury of working in cloud-first organizations where the apps are, where all the products were built for cloud. But I've also worked, and I just came from 4 days at the BioIT conference out in Boston, which is all of the technology suppliers servicing large pharmaceutical, those doing scientific and health research. And those are industries that have not been as aggressive about moving to cloud, but they do, mostly because of the nature of the data that's there,
Regulation.
the reliability that has to be there, and repeatability in research. So they have a very reasonable reason for not having gone to it. But it also highlighted that exactly what you said, that the products that are truly built for cloud are built for cloud. Those that are built for on-prem, but they don't have data center space, or they want somebody else to maintain the reliability of it, are in fact that. They are pick up and drop off of data centers. I think there is a model for both still, but cloud, in one of the presentations I was at there, cloud equals competitiveness as you look over the long horizon. And I agree.
But I think it also gets to the heart of the problem that we have. It's not specific to security, but we see it, I mean, just being in security, see it pop up a lot, that buzzword bingo, the gray area of some of the terms. You know, we're in XDR, we're in EDR, we're in the cloud, we're all of these different terms.
Thank goodness there's only 26 letters.
Yeah, we could sell a book on just all of the different definitions that are out there. But I think that's the problem, that it means so many different things to so many different people. I mean, think about, Arun likes to talk about zero trust. That, for the longest time, zero trust was, buy our product, we're zero trust ready. Well, no, that's not what it means. It's a journey, it's a concept, it's a mindset that we're going towards. And that's still a systemic problem in the community.
So, and now I'm going to go back to what got us here won't get us there. So as people transform, moving not just data, but now creating for their business, their own applications, right? They're creating services around the data that they're able to gather in, depending on whether you're automotive, whether you're banking, et cetera. You have these things that are appealing and viable to you that create other services, which is other routes of revenue. And now your task from a security side, are we protecting this? How are we protecting this? Where are we hosting this? What things are we using for visibility? Like the tools that worked here on-prem are not the same tools you use up here. Because
Right.
we talked about this last week. It was one of the 8 points from Jess Burns and Forrester, where she noted it was like number 6, paying down, it wasn't just paying down your tech debt, it was realizing where your tech debt sits.
Right.
And part of that was, from cloud security posture management, being able to be in there to have visibility of it and what that means. Because I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole in automotive, but it goes back to when you look at automotive, from designing, when people would say, well, why does it take 2 years to bring a vehicle to fruition, right? There's a lot of testing that goes into everything and validation, because you have 200, 300, 400 suppliers, right, that are supplying parts that you're validating in. Each one of those you could kind of consider a container, right? And now you're speeding things up. You got a whole different cycle, and it's much faster in the cloud. But the products you use up there truly are different than the products we use today on-prem.
Right. And a couple things on that. So number one, I think the workforce is going to demand that change. As we look at it from a mean time to productivity, if we're onboarding a new individual, they're not going to sit around and wait for, well, I got to ship you a laptop, I got to teach you how to use VPN, and then, hey, let me give you the URL to all of these different tools that we're using inside the company. No, it doesn't work like that, right? We've got to be faster with what we're doing. But the cloud, the whole cloud debate, I mean, kind of going back, that you and I have had that quite a bit, to go to the cloud, not go to the cloud, because I think there's still this idea that if you go to the cloud, it's naturally secure, but it's not that easy, right? There's still things that we have to think about. But from a security perspective, it allows us to contain everything in one spot that helps us protect it. Also, the availability of what we can do in the cloud, for most of us, outpaces what we can do on-prem from a cost perspective.
Yeah, and the scalability and the performance and the load times and the load volumes if you have to process mass amounts of data. Who wants to buy all that much platter for yourself? But the other piece is, and this was somebody who is an enterprise architect that I worked with decades ago, and the idea was, in all internal strategies, was buy for parity, build for competitive advantage. And in this case, and I know we've had an episode where we talked all about, is security a competitive advantage for a company? It is, I say. It is. But the fundamentals of the security, like operation security, monitoring, attack defense, et cetera, don't necessarily have to be your competitive advantage. Building secure apps, yes. But those are the kind of things that you can give to expert organizations that have the scale and volume and ability to do, and that's what they do well, like Amazon, like Google, like Microsoft for those things. And that is what they do, and you let them do it, and you build darn secure applications on top that are fit for purpose. That's your competitive advantage. And even the security, that portion of the security can be parity. Send it out, let the experts be the experts.
You're almost using transparency as a competitive advantage. And for a lot of us, that's about
It's a business advantage at that point.
It is a business advantage. And some of that, for a lot of us, kind of going tangential here, but with what's going on with the SEC, a lot of that's going to change. A lot of us are going to have to be, in our 10Ks, a lot more transparent on what does your ISMS look like? What are the processes, procedures you have in place? What breaches have you seen? I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself.
Well, let's bring it back to something that everybody listening and here in the audience can relate to, passwords. Just today, Apple, Google, Microsoft all announced a new combined initiative to put more focus into and deeper integration into passwordless access management. This is definitely a shift from the ages of passwords.
It's going to be a huge mind shift for a lot of organizations.
It is. It's going to allow, I have 500 contracts that I have to unwrite that say you must use 8 characters, you must have 14 changes of this and a special and an upper lower, and that's going to be the hardest part, is making sure that
Changed
we're not
every
like
90 days. Don't forget about that one.
45 if they're really bad, and just have an exclamation point and a 1 at the end. But yeah, I see all of you going, I got to change it now. But this is definitely a shift, and it's a shift in not just technology, but also mindset. Something that in my whole career, and it goes way farther back, passwords are passwords are passwords are passwords, and it's a key piece. Now we have to not only re-educate, but retool our technology, our policies, our own internally developed, the parts that are competitive advantage, and make sure that those include these new paradigms to make it easier, because people will begin to start to expect it soon.
Right, and that's why agility is so important, being able to let go of what we've done in the past. And I've had this conversation a number of times. We were talking to some individuals about application, a couple different areas, but I see a lot of organizations that struggle all right, we'll recognize you and I are talking about, we have to change, but I want to hold on to this tenet, and if you're holding on to the past, can you truly grasp for the future? As practitioners, I think it's so key that we've got to be willing to recognize and say, hey, what I did yesterday, it's not good enough, right? We have to throw it away. We're rebuilding. We're going a different direction.
But it's easy to lose sight of the past. I was a history major. We ended up in security.
Take notes on that.
But no, history's dates, so we need to know the date. No, we won't. But you can't lose sight of the history, or we'll end up in the back in a similar pattern as we regenerate as we look at what comes new as we make those shifts. It's easy for people to go, I'm done with the past in tech, and not think about the mistakes we made that got us to where we are today, to a decently good place. We're going to make the same mistakes all over again.
Are you advocating bringing the floppy disk back? Is that?
Wait, it went away.
Oh.
Actually, I have some that are coasters next to my bed. That's what the drinks go on.
For those that are younger, it's a little disc that we used to we had to actually put it in the computer.
It wasn't
close
always
it,
just the save sign.
and if you pulled it out before it was actually done writing, you ruined the whole desk.
So somebody posted that online where they said they showed it to their son or daughter, and their son or daughter said to them, they're like, no way, you 3D printed the button for save on my computer.
Exactly.
And they were like, oh
that's
no,
great.
right? So again, what got you here won't get you there. Like things are changing. So
you know what? I actually want to dive down a little bit into what you just talked about in 10Ks. For our context, for those of you that don't know or aren't part of a corporate reporting team, the SEC has recently come out with some new guidance that talks about the requirement for public companies to disclose material risk that exists inside their organization as part of their public. Sorry.
no, bring
cards.
Yeah,
cards.
bring those on
Yes,
up here.
Definitely bring up cards. I thought usually that's where the person stands that says you're already over time.
Yeah. It's a good spot for the shepherd's hook to pull us.
Exactly. What was I saying? Oh, so a 10K. So we have to do this reporting, and it's going to be public. It's going to go part of the public reporting that gets posted on the SEC website for every public company, which means, good for those of us in the security world, we have a great driver.
Right.
Well, we have a great driver to one, cause the organization to talk about risk, understand risk, but also decide which risks we want to close before the first of those reportings. It drives. It's an incubator for, it's a cattle prod
For change?
It's a cattle prod for change. It gets things moving, but at the same time, that kind of transparency isn't always comfortable for organizations, for people, for staff, for managers, about the thing. For a lot of time in security, we would talk to each other in cloistered rooms, back rooms, talking about the things we saw, but we could never talk about them in public because competitiveness and other things. This changes it. How do you see that we need to adapt when we're making when in preparation for these, as a security field, as a technology field? Because this goes way beyond just security practitioners. This goes into business practice, it goes into technology, into the wider IT organization. What do we need to keep in mind?
I think for me, the forced transparency means you have to definitely execute on all of those tenets. It won't be good enough to just say, hey, I have an asset management program, I have a vulnerability management program that I'm just phoning at home, right? Vulnerability management program, and then you find out, well, we're only pushing out patches. That's where it stopped. So I think from a transparency standpoint, it's going to be key, because I think we all believe that we are all going to get breached at some point, and when that happens, now courts are going to start to look back at the 10K. Well, you said all of these elements, and hold you to them. So I think there's a big, on the transparency side, making sure that we are actually executing on all of those tenets.
Right.
But I don't think you need to go, so as you talk about the backroom conversations and how we back channel, whether it be our Slack channel with all the Detroit CISOs and all of that, I don't think you're going to get the granularity of our conversations in the 10K. It's still going to be pretty high level on the overall program.
It'll go through the attorney filter, and it'll go through the reasonableness public filter.
Right.
And those are right. Those are the right things to do.
Right, but think about the timing of that, and I'm just throwing this out to everybody here. Transparency matters in speed to report something, not just reporting it to X, Y, and Z, but how you're transparent with the public. And I'm not going to call out names in terms of vendors, et cetera, but we've seen plenty in the last 3 months, right, that the way things were handled have left black eyes. And when you get a black eye and you lose trust, I think that's all very important, especially being a Detroiter, what we're about to see, with this huge shift in how vehicles are used, how we handle that from a data perspective, right? Because some of the questions here were around autonomous vehicle ethics, connected vehicles, and so forth. How we handle that approach, and this is actually how we actually started our conversation at the Detroit City Distillery almost 3 years ago, was around, everyone was having this talk, and I was like, just so you know, I go, you go back and look at what Google's premise was when they came out and said, what was their original mantra, don't be evil, or we're not evil, right? And then 10 years later, people are like, oh, I don't know if I trust them. Are they listening in on me when I do this? And look at the search engine and everything else. It knows me better than my wife knows me, right? Like, there's some truth to that, right? Because how much time you spend online. The notion earlier about, do you look at your phone before you go to bed, right? And then when you wake up in the morning, I wonder what you're looking at. Well, they know what you're looking at, right? Literally. So the notion of that, of how we handle that from a transparency standpoint, when to report, how we report, but also how we manage that data going forward, I think is going to leave us in a much better situation from business and also from the Detroit area. But I thought we'd get to one of the questions there. It kind of falls into all three because some people asked the best point of entry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a few questions here. They're all really great, and thank you for submitting these. I appreciate it. How would someone new to security find the best fit to enter the workforce? How can a fresh college graduate enter into cybersecurity, and where can they learn? And this one, we all have kids. How do we teach our children about cybersecurity, and at what age do you start? I'm going to start with that one and say the day they're born. It starts, and I'm going to bring in the privacy angle, because the digital footprint of the discussion earlier around your digital postage stamp, your digital postage stamp. It's way bigger than that. It's a digital post office with the way we post, with the pictures of the kids and other things. That education starts at day one. It starts when you see things on TV or in programs that encourage the habits that don't necessarily align with good cybersecurity, and making those part of, just like you wouldn't step off the side of the curb to cross the road. When do you start teaching that, Brian?
No, those are great points, because we've talked about this too, because somebody put the attention span up there, right, which was like 6 seconds, and a goldfish is
mine was already over by then.
right, like, but there's a lot of truth to this. And I remember talking to my son when we got him his first cell phone, and the conversation about when you have to put it down at night, like you can't take it to your room. But the first level of conversation we had was around anxiety, right, around that phone, that there's going to come a point where you're going to be wondering what happened. And that's what, and trying to explain what anxiety was. And we asked him, do you know what anxiety is? And he was like, no. A month later, he's like, I know what anxiety is. And then he explained to us what the feeling was, right? And there's a level that's created there with it. So I know that wasn't part of the question, but it's part of the reality as you start having these conversations, because there is a digital footprint being left that people can look back at. And people fear then the things they've done, but didn't realize it at the time they were doing it, right? That awareness is really important. They mentioned that I was
even more so as parents. We do it for our kids without asking them before they can even answer. We set pictures out there. My child is older, but he came up in a different era before we were thinking about this. And I had a blog website that was out there for family and friends to keep up with. You know what? Later, realized what a bad idea that was. It was a publicly available thing. I never asked him, and it's now down.
Eric, have you ever read the book?
But is it really deleted?
No, I fuzzed it with bad pictures of other people, not bad pictures. Pictures of other people, so they can't detect which one is actually.
I think what you're getting back to, so to phrase it in a different way, it's respecting technology as a tool, right?
Yes.
Rather than letting it consume you. That it's purpose-driven, use it for that purpose, but don't let it control you.
Did you ever
know the implications of the action, and teach about the implications, the action and reaction that goes along with everything
Oh, certainly.
you do.
I mean, I say it in jest about, is it really deleted, but kind of teach the kids that anything you put out there, it's out there forever.
I
It's
wouldn't
not
want
going
to be
away.
a kid right now when it comes to tech and what's out there. It's so hard.
There's a great book, if you want to read it, just to have an understanding. And for people in security, they probably already have this understanding. But for those that are not in security, it's called Future Crimes. Read the book. The second I read the book, I got rid of Twitter, I got rid of Facebook, I got rid of Instagram. I got entirely nervous, and my wife was like, oh, you're so freaking me out with all this security talk, right? But there was so much truth to reading that, right? And then being in the industry, things that from a digital footprint side, that I was just like, wow, I never looked at it from this standpoint. So what got us here won't get you there. It's now having those conversations early on. I think another point there was...
But the corollary, though, is that you bake this in early, and they will come to the workplace with these skills innately. The idea of critical thinking, the idea of thinking before clicking, the idea of action and reaction and digital traces and things that they've grown up with, or how to store passwords in a good place, where maybe we won't have passwords anymore. But just those kinds of things that are part of everyday life, rather than at the age of 18, then saying it's equivalent of saying at age 18, start learning a new language, a whole new talking language, and by the time you're 21, you better be fluent on it, or no one's going to give you a job.
No.
So pivot. So I know we're each teaching our kids about it, but if you're talking about, so one of the other questions on there was about getting into security. You're coming out of college, or you're looking to make a career change. Recommendations.
Meet people.
Well,
That's where I was going to go as well.
Be part of groups like this. Meet people.
MCWT, WAMSA, there's some amazing groups out
WAMSA,
there.
CSA, and for anybody out there, look us up. Shoot me a question.
Yeah,
Shoot
likewise.
Dan a question. Be happy to put you.
Eric, no, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric,
If you want good advice, I just send memes.
Be happy to connect you with those groups. Like, there's people I know whose neighbors have asked them, like, hey, you said you have a friend in security. How does my son get into security? I'm like, just connect him with me, right? Happy to explain. And then I ask the questions like, what are you looking to do? And their first response typically is, I don't know, I was just interested in security. Like, where do I start? Most people don't even know where to start, and there isn't a lot of programs out there at schools. So if you're requiring a 4-year degree, show me all the different universities that actually have 4-year degrees on cybersecurity and how often that cybersecurity curriculum would have to change. So it goes back to what got us here won't get us there. Like, you have to rethink that a little bit. So connect us. Happy
I
to
think
help.
a big portion of that is also understanding what are your passions, because security is so wide. You know, I hear that from a lot of people. I want to get into security. Okay, what do you want to do? And there's actually, and make that part of the certification.
That's what I'm pulling up. I was going to pull up Rafiq Rahman's.
The mind map?
It's a mind map of the whole world of information security. And I'll put the links in the show notes. But it's probably 800 entries now of just things that make up information security. And every one of them can be a job, can be a role, can be a career. Not all of them are technical. You can be in STEM, you can be in technology without having to be a developer.
And there's areas that are coming up all the time that aren't even represented in there. If you think about, I'm going to go buzzword bingo, AI and ML, as we start building out some of those algorithms, being able to actually protect those, and
I
you
literally twitched.
Wait, hold on. There's a great lead in here in a question, just around AI and ML. And it was from perspectives of a user online or a business manager, what keeps you awake as more businesses move into the cloud? And then there was another one here that asked just like, how do you stay on top of all this stuff? Well, we've always talked about people, process, and product in that order, right? People most importantly, then process, but also product. So AI and machine learning, there's stuff there that is there to help you, right? Because there's massive amounts of data when it comes to security to be able to sift that down, but you still do need people in place, right, to make actionable decisions on it. And you get all these companies out there that say, yeah, but we created the algorithm to make the decision for you. Sure, there probably is tech that can do that for you. But at the end of the day, you still need people looking at that where those are the right decisions, like ultimately. So
Data science is a huge piece of where security is going. Has nothing to do with firewalls and routers. So you were going to bring up the certification.
The
sheet of-
certification map.
Yeah,
who put that out? Was that the government that put that
I
out?
don't know. If I knew, I would already have it up. I'm going to have to research and
Yeah,
figure
we'll
out
have to
where
find
it came
it.
from.
But you can Google. There's some good images that go through all of the vastness of security certifications. It'll go through all of the different disciplines that we know about today, and it built a certification route. Some of those entry ones are actually good points that it'll give you kind of a base level of knowledge.
Yeah. I want to go a slightly different route even. And with all due respect, I know we have amazing large organizations in the room, and I love what you do. But those internships are really competitive. My answer is internships. Internships are really competitive and hard to get to. There are more tech companies out there than Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Amazon. Go for small companies. You can find internships out there across all sizes and companies. Keep trying for the big organizations because you really good experience there. But you get a very different type of experience, a broad experience, a lot more bootstrap and startup-y in those kinds of organizations if that fits your interests. And there are a lot of organizations that are looking for that help. Even as when I was doing virtual CISO work, I had interns and gave them experience in seeing small companies at their earliest asking, how do we start building security into the thing we do? Whole different focus. But the point is expand beyond just those first parts.
could I throw out, there's one last question. I know we got limited time right here. And just to the room, this one was around security insurance, and it asked the question, how is this developing? But for everyone in the room, that's familiar with cybersecurity insurance, has anybody's cybersecurity insurance not increased in the last 3 years? Good show of hands. It's hard
No.
to see. So the reality is the question was, how is this developing? I don't know if it's just that it's developing or if
I'm going to put that into, let's put that into another episode because
Yeah.
we don't have in
That's
the
gonna be parking
39
lot.
seconds
got a lot to
the
unpack.
ability to capture that.
No,
But what
totally.
I do want to do is thank everybody here in the audience. Large round of applause for all of you, especially those that provided questions. We really appreciate it. And thanks to you, the listeners of the podcast. We really appreciate you all being here, and we appreciate you listening. but what we appreciate even more is your feedback. You can contact us at feedback@greatsecurity-debate.net. You can visit our website, www.greatsecurity-debate.net, or you can find us on Twitter @SecurityDebate. We'll be back next time for another Great Security Debate.